find a favorite of ours in this distinguished anthology of spook shows. Personally, I've never met anybody who didn't like a good ghost story. But I know a lot of people who think there are a lot of people who don't like a good ghost story. For the benefit of these,
I'm Edward October. The voice you hear is legendary actor, director, writer, narrator, and raconteur Orson Welles. This is the start of Octoberpod.
It's already been called a real Orson Welles story. Now, frankly, I don't know what this means. I've been on the air directing and acting in my own shows for quite a while now, and I don't suppose I've done more than half a dozen thrillers in all that time. Honestly, I don't think even that many, but it seems I do have a reputation for the uncanny. Quite possibly, a little escapade of mine involving a couple of planets, which shall be nameless, is responsible.
He's right, you know. From the moment he produced his proto-found footage radio adaptation of The War of the Worlds for the Mercury Theater on the Air, Welles forged his reputation as a master of horror for the remainder of his career. In this introduction for the radio anthology Suspense, Welles is underselling his association with horror and the uncanny. True, Welles never made a straight-up horror film, but just look at his output in the medium of old-time radio. Let's start with Suspense. The story he's introducing is The Hitchhiker, written by Lucille Fletcher, who also wrote the masterful radio thriller Sorry, Wrong Number. It's easily one of the creepiest radio dramas ever broadcast. It's the story of a man being haunted by an otherworldly hitchhiker on a long road trip from New York to California. It was later remade as an episode of The Twilight Zone, and anyone who's seen Carnival of Souls or Jacob's Ladder might be able to guess the ending. Take The Shadow. Welles is the first actor to play the supernatural detective Lamont Cranston and his creepy alter ego, The Shadow, in an ongoing radio series devoted to the character. There's plenty of horror to be found there. Listen to one of our older episodes, the one called Where Evil Lurks, to hear more about Welles and The Shadow. Finally, Welles himself portrayed both Dr. Seward and Count Dracula in Mercury Theater's adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
The blood! The blood! Wipe the blood from your face, Mr. Harker, and take care how you cut yourself.
Outside of radio, as a filmmaker, Welles mostly directed art films and Shakespeare adaptations, with occasional work-for-hire directing gigs sprinkled in. But even his least horrific pictures contain touches of horror and haunting images that would influence generations of horror creators. In Citizen Kane, the title character's sprawling mansion Xanadu is rendered like a nightmarish haunted house, even before it falls to ruin. In his noir film to end all noir films, A Touch of Evil, Welles delivers stark black and white compositions and morally ambiguous characters that would feel right at home in a gothic potboiler. Just add some ghosts or an axe-wielding psychopath and stir. And then there's Welles's 1942 Republic Pictures adaptation of Macbeth.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, pouring cow's blood that has eaten her 9 pharaoh. Grease that's sweating from the murderer's gibbet, thrown to the flame. Finger of birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drap. Make the cruel thick and suave, like a hell broth, boil and bubble, for a charm of powerful trouble. When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won, that will be at the set of sun. There to meet with Macbeth.
I defy anyone to watch this picture and argue with a straight face that it doesn't look and feel like a horror film. The black and white photography, the heavy fog, and gothic castle sets conspire to recreate the atmosphere of a universal monster picture. Welles himself referred to it as a perfect cross between Wuthering Heights and Bride of Frankenstein. The depiction of the witches, carrying crooked staves and controlling Macbeth's destiny through the use of a fetish or effigy of him like a voodoo doll, is evocative of folk horror. Speaking of voodoo dolls, did you know that Welles wrote a stage adaptation of Macbeth set on a Caribbean island with a cast of all-black actors? Scottish witchcraft was replaced with witch doctors and Haitian voodoo, earning the 1936 production the nickname Voodoo Macbeth.
The scene was changed from Scotland to Haiti, but the spirit of Macbeth and every line in the play has remained intact. In this contribution to the American theater and in other projects under the Works program, we have set our feet on the road toward a brighter future.
Peace! The charms wound up!
Incidentally, Welles co-directed this production with his Mercury Theater collaborator John Houseman, whom horror fans may recognize from the films Ghost Story, Scrooged, and John Carpenter's The Fog. War of the Worlds, The Shadow, Dracula, Macbeth, any one of these would be enough to crown Welles as a horror icon. But during the 1980s, a period when he was doing a lot of acting for hire jobs to fund passion projects like The Other Side of the Wind, Welles appeared in his most frightening picture, The Man Who Saw Tomorrow. Okay, hear me out. The year is 1987. You're in the 3rd grade. It's the day before Thanksgiving break starts, and your teacher doesn't much feel like teaching that day. So she wheels out a TV and a VCR on one of those metal carts that all schools used to have, switches off all the lights, and turns on this.
Let me warn you now that the predictions of the future are not at all comforting.
In the year 1999 and 7 months, from the sky will come the great king of terror. He will bring back to life the king of the Mongols. Before and after war reigns. Out of the country of Greater Arabia shall be born a strong master of Mohammedan law. This king will enter Europe wearing a blue turban. He is one that shall cause the infernal gods of Hannibal to live again. He will be the terror of mankind, never more horror. Warfare on a greater scale than ever before. Explosions. There will be a great onslaught.
What would you do if you thought you knew the exact day World War III would break out? And who might start it, where it might be fought, and who might be left when it was over? Where would you go? How would you protect your family?
There will be terror, terror, terror.
Jesus Christ. They showed this in school, so it must be true. It's narrated by Orson Welles, intoning ominous predictions of the future with his godlike voice from a wood-paneled Victorian study that might as well belong to Sherlock Holmes or Professor Van Helsing. And cousin, he skulks around that set in his plus-size black suit, puffing a cigar like a horror host, ready to scare us so badly that we'll drop our trick-or-treat sacks and run. Yes, The Man Who Saw Tomorrow might well be responsible for more Gen X elementary school-aged nightmares than any other film. This, documentary with dramatic reenactments and done in the style of a big-budget feature-length episode of In Search Of, investigates the life and predictions of Nostradamus. The picture begins with a grave robber being shot to death after drinking from the skull of the dead French soothsayer, and ends with a lurid dramatization of a prophesized nuclear-powered World War III that would look right at home in a mid-budget sci-fi picture. Throughout the film, Welles recounts all the Nostradamus predictions that allegedly came true with the sobriety of a news anchor and allowing very little room for skepticism. If there was a twinkle in Wells's eye, it was too subtle for young audiences to detect. So by the end, when the predictions turned to the far-off year 1999 and talk of a dreaded third Antichrist who starts World War III wearing a blue turban, all of us kiddies were ready to begin lifelong careers as doomsday preppers. It was this film that cemented Orson Welles a place in my mind as a true horror legend. Like all legendary figures, Orson Welles has had more than a few legends of varying veracity pop up about him. I'll be back during the intermission to discuss 2 legends about Orson Welles that I frequently see repeated as fact. One of them involving a certain Martian invasion in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. And speaking of alien invasions, Emma, Tash, and Becky of Spine Chillers and Serial Killers are here to share with you, among other things, the case of a strange disappearance, which might have been the result of extraterrestrial visitors. Ladies?
I'm Emma.
I'm Tash.
And I'm Becky. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
So this week I am talking about the disappearance of Frederick Valentich. Frederick Valentich was born on the 9th of June, 1958, to parents Guido and Albertina Valentich.
I love the name Guido. Such a fun name.
Yeah. The family lived in Melbourne, Australia, and little Frederick always dreamed of aviation and aspired to become a commercial airline pilot. A dream that he did follow, but with many setbacks. Once he was of age, he tried to join the RAAF, but was rejected twice because of his inadequate educational qualifications. He then started working towards his commercial pilot's license and had racked up 150 hours of flying experience, which allowed him to fly at night as long as the weather conditions permitted it. At the age of 20, he fell in love with a 16-year-old called Rhonda Rushton. This is 1958.
Yeah, I imagine that it was okay back then.
And if he was 24 and she
now.
was 20, we wouldn't question it.
But I was definitely 16 going out with a 21-year-old. So,
yeah, and now we all realise that was kind of not
yeah,
okay.
that was not correct.
But he had a car.
He did. He did. He had a car.
So, yeah, he's in love with a girl called Rhonda Rushton, who's 16. They quickly began a serious relationship, and after just a few months, Frederick proposed to Rhonda using a friendship ring, promising her that he would replace it with a proper engagement ring as soon as he could afford it.
That's sweet.
Aww.
That is sweet. At least his intentions were pure. Like, he wanted to marry her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He often took Rhoda flying with him, and she described him as a diligent and responsible pilot. Despite this description from Rhonda, it must be known that Frederick had also received several warnings after flying once into a restricted zone in Sydney and twice into clouds. On October 21st, 1978, Frederick rented a Cessna 182L, a popular single-engine light airplane that had been widely used for personal, instructional and light commercial purposes, for a training flight from Moorabbin to King Island, a 125-mile trek over the Bass Strait. Given the typical cruising speed of the Cessna 182L, which is around 114 knots, approximately 160 miles per hour, or 260 kilometers per hour, that should get everybody covered, the flight should have taken about 1 to 1.5 hours under normal conditions. The tank was fully fueled, which would allow 5 hours of flying time, give or take. So, he's got plenty of fuel, the weather conditions are good, all is hunky-dory. He had told some that he was going to pick up friends, and others had been told that he was going to pick up crayfish. So he's being a bit sketchy there. He's not giving the same reasons for the flight. And neither of the stories turned out to be true. In fact, it came to light later that Frederick hadn't even informed the King Island Flight Service of his arrival, which of course was against protocol.
Mm-hmm. Not good.
This information only adds to the mystery around his disappearance. He left Moorabbin Airport at approximately 6:19 p.m. and would never be seen again. At 1900 hours local time, Valentich radioed that he had Cape Otway in sight, which was on his flight path, so we can assume he was on track and in the right place at the right time. According to the weather station, the weather in Cape Otway was clear, excellent visibility and light winds. At 1906, Frederick radioed Melbourne Flight Service asking if there were any other aircrafts around him, to which they replied there was none. He said he was being followed by a craft with what looked like 4 bright landing lights and 1 big green light. He said the craft appeared to be playing with him and travelling at great speeds. He asked again if there were any military planes around, as he couldn't quite grasp what he was seeing, but nothing was supposed to be flying near him. He then stated that the craft had vanished altogether, but had quickly reappeared and was back on his tail. The radio then fell silent, except for the sound of a strange metallic scraping, and then nothing. That was the last time anyone would ever hear from Frederick Valentich. So I have the actual transcript of his final moments here, and the fabulous Edward October from Octoberpod AM and Mike from Brew Crime have done little voiceovers so that we can actually listen to the transcript.
Oh, love it.
I know. Bless them. So thank you very much. Go check their podcasts out. Go give them 5-star ratings because they are my best podcast friends and they're always helping us out. And this also has been edited by Edward October, who is an absolute whiz at what he does. So here we go. I'll play it for you now.
Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known traffic below 5,000?
Delta Sierra Juliet. No known traffic.
Seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000.
Delta Sierra Juliet. What type of aircraft is it?
I cannot affirm. It is 4 bright, seems to me like landing lights.
Delta Sierra Juliet.
Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. The aircraft has just passed over me at least 1,000 feet above.
Delta Sierra Juliet, roger. And it is a large aircraft? Confirm?
Unknown due to the speed it's traveling. Is there any Air Force aircraft in the vicinity?
Delta Sierra Juliet. No known aircraft in the vicinity.
Melbourne, it's approaching now from due east towards me.
Delta Sierra Juliet.
It seems to me that he's playing some sort of game. He's flying over me 2-3 times at a time at speeds that I could not identify.
Delta Sierra Juliet, roger. What is your actual level?
My level is 4,500. 4500.
Delta Sierra Juliet. And confirm you cannot identify the aircraft?
Affirmative.
Delta Sierra Juliet, roger. Stand by.
Melbourne, Delta Sierra Juliet. It's not an aircraft. It is...
Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne. Can you describe the aircraft?
As it's flying past, it's a long shape. Cannot identify more than that. It has such speed. It is before me right now, Melbourne.
Delta Sierra Juliet, roger. And how large would the object be?
Melbourne, it seems like it's stationary. What I'm doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me. Also, it's got a green light and sort of metallic-like. It's all shiny on the outside.
Delta Sierra Juliet.
It's just vanished.
Delta Sierra Juliet.
Melbourne, would you know what kind of aircraft I've got? Is it a type of military aircraft?
Delta Sierra Juliet. Confirm the... aircraft just vanished?
Say again.
Delta Sierra Juliet. Is the aircraft still with you?
It's, north. Now approaching from the southwest.
Delta Sierra Juliet.
The engine is rough idling. I've got it set at 23, 24, and the thing is coughing.
Delta Sierra Juliet, roger. What are your intentions?
My intentions are, to go to King Island. Melbourne, that strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft.
Delta Sierra Juliet.
Melbourne.
Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne.
Melbourne.
And there you go. Now, just to clarify, none of that has been dramatised. On the transcript, the moments of silence and open radio and sound distortion was all written down, and Ed has copied that to a T. So none of that was dramatised.
Wow. It's quite intense, isn't it?
Mental.
Yeah, it's very odd. I think that's probably the closest thing we'll ever get to hearing like the proper audio.
Yeah.
You could almost say that was like the proper audio. You could have said, we've got the audio, and I wouldn't have known who it was. I'd be like, oh, this is really clear audio. Oh, it's brilliant. Well done.
Thank you.
guys.
So yeah, go and...
Brilliant.
Mike from Brew Crime and Ed from Octoberpod AM, go give him a 5-star review just for that, because that was fab.
Brilliant.
But how bizarre.
So
bizarre.
strange.
That noise at the end.
It was eerie.
It
Very.
You could like imagine with how they were describing it and the noises and stuff, you can kind of imagine it happening. How scary would that be?
Yeah.
Terrifying.
So scary.
And there was nothing, well, you're probably going to get into this, there's nothing ever found, like no shrapnel.
Okay. I've got a little bit more.
Okay. Give me
So
just
there
a
was, of
little
course, an
bit more.
extensive search for Frederick in the air and sea, but not a single trace of him or the plane was found, and eventually the vanishing was considered fatal and the case was closed. Now the big question, what on earth happened to Frederick Valentich? The first theory, of course, is that he was an unexperienced pilot and it was night time. He got disorientated, turned upside down, and was actually seeing his own reflection in the water and eventually crashed into the ocean.
Semi-plausible.
Apparently, it does happen with pilots.
But you know
that
you're
they
upside down, though, because like your hair would be like... Burp.
But maybe, well, he'd have had short hair. I don't know. Anyway.
On my cheeks would be going... Definitely. My boobs would be in my face.
Yeah.
Nah.
But it does have holes. It doesn't account for the metallic shine the other craft appeared to have, or that he saw it flying past him and over and underneath, and in one instance disappearing altogether.
Yeah. Both scenarios are terrifying, though. Imagine him not knowing that he's flying upside down and he could see himself in the water. That as well is absolutely terrifying.
I mean, it's to do with planes, so I'm terrified anyway, because I'm absolutely petrified of aeroplanes.
Are you?
Yeah, oh yeah. Then, of course, if we forget most of the transcript, he did describe engine issues. So one theory is plainly that his engine failed, resulting in a crash. Okay, so there was also a meteor shower that night that could possibly account for the lights in the sky he was seeing. And if he was disorientated, maybe he was seeing them pass at great speed and thought it was a type of unknown craft. And then, the most obvious and yet the less likely theory is he encountered a UFO.
Ironically, I don't think it is the less likely theory. I think that's the most plausible explanation. Is that because we do this podcast?
Probably.
It's probably right. I was just like, UFO.
Instantly,
Yeah, well,
UFO.
yeah.
I was like, what other explanation could there be?
I agree, but I think UFO abductions and all that, it's still very not taboo, but does it happen? I don't know.
Yes, Emma. Yes, it does.
Okay, there we go then. Well,
I just think. Sorry. I'm interjecting here.
You're fine. Interject.
But I actually think we would be really narcissistic as a race to believe that we are the only beings ever on our planet, that there's no other life anywhere else apart from what we know.
I think the point is there's obviously life on other planets in other galaxies, but that they're so far away that to come and visit us, that their technology would have to be extremely advanced. And if they were that advanced, why would they waste their time coming to visit us? It would be a bit like...
Sorry, have you met us three alone? That's why.
Maybe.
Technology is advanced, but have they got the humour of us? I don't think so.
Maybe.
No.
Maybe they just come down to like tune into spine chillers and serial killers.
Yeah, then they go back again. They'll be like, are they going to mention us?
Are they talking about us?
Are they fangirling over us?
Crescent, you're on. They're talking about the sex.
You dirty slang. Oh dear. Just joking. I don't know if that's offensive to aliens.
I think people compare it to as if we'd spend a load of energy and time going to another planet to visit ants, basically.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I could be properly super narcissistic for saying this as a race. But I think the fact that humans got as intelligent as they did was an accident. And I don't know if that would happen again. Because if you look at everything else compared to like a human brain, that just sounds really, really full of ourselves, doesn't it? But I heard someone else, there was a scientist talking about it, and he said that he just think that the humans becoming as intelligent as we have over a very short period of time was just an accident. And have we reached the max, the max of how intelligent that we can become? Have we going to just become more stupid now because of the technology that we've created? There was a whole big thing. I'll have to try and find the documentary about it. It was really interesting. But then it explained that maybe on other planets where there is life, that, like you say, that there's just a load of fish or a load of insects or a load of dinosaurs or whatever grew there first.
There's probably there's probably that, but if we take into account that there are UFOs and UFOs are actually aliens coming to the planet, then they have to be a lot more evolved than us, because there isn't the technology otherwise to travel from the distance that they're traveling, because we haven't found life on other planets anywhere near us, and as far as I know, we've explored quite far away. So I think it's more that they would need some extremely high-tech gear to get to us.
Yeah.
But
in their
dolphins
lifespan.
Are really intelligent. Like dolphins and killer
also
whales.
rapists, though, so...
Yeah, we don't talk about dolphins here.
We don't talk about dolphins.
No.
That took me 3 years to get that song out of my head. Thanks, Tasha. Straight back in there.
Anyway, moving on. So, the less likely or more likely, depending on who you are, is that you encountered a UFO. Ufologists in the area said there were sightings of crafts in the sky that night and the day after his disappearance. One group even claims to have a photograph that was taken near where Frederick vanished that shows a UFO, but it also has been judged too blurry to be used as proof. A farmer that remained anonymous claimed he saw a huge craft above his farm and saw Frederick's plane attached to it, and he said the plane was leaking fuel. UFO groups have tried to find said farmer, but to no avail. But judging by his final conversation and the many sightings we know to be real by modern-day pilots, is it really all that unlikely that Frederick was in fact abducted by aliens? I feel like the more the governments tell us, the more likely the possibility is. The weird thing is that Frederick had a fear of experiencing a UFO encounter. He spoke of it often with his father and his girlfriend, stating that if he ever saw one, he would only go willingly if Rhonda came too. But in all reality, the idea terrified him. The last theory is that he planned his own disappearance or committed suicide. But this has been hugely debunked by his friends and family, stating that he had a very happy and excited feeling about his future plans with Rhonda and would never do something like that. 5 years after the event, an engine cowl flap washed ashore on Flinders Island. The Bureau of Air Safety Investigation noted that the part came from the same type of aircraft Valentich was piloting, and that it had serial numbers within the same range as Valentich's plane, but could not confirm with certainty that it was his plane. His father spent his lifetime praying that he had been abducted by aliens and not crashed, because that gave him hope that he might see him again. Sadly, he died in 2000, never getting the answers he'd so desperately wanted. The disappearance of Frederick Valentich remains one of aviation's most enduring mysteries. This case continues to captivate and puzzle researchers and enthusiasts alike, with no definitive answers emerging in the decades since the event. And there you go.
Oh, wow. That's alarming.
It's a bit disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. Just mildly.
I think I'd have sounded a lot more panicked on those recordings, so he's a very brave person if he thought that he saw a UFO and was still kind of staying calm.
Staying cool.
Yeah, cool as a cuke.
Yeah. So yeah, what do you think happened to him?
UFO. Despite just having said, I think we're the only ones. Definitely UFO.
Tash, UFO?
Yeah, I mean, what else? I mean, there is other options, but I think UFO.
Same. UFO. Okay, we've sorted it. We debunked
it.
Yeah.
We solved it.
Problem solved.
2024. All it took was 3 women on a podcast.
Yeah.
Monsters do have their place. In the zoo. In your nightmares. In the deep. In your favorite horror movies. But not on your phone during an ad break. Politically motivated interests are seeking to influence you through the ads placed on this podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Edward October, reminding you that we have very limited control over the ads you hear on Octoberpod. Please remember that only the ads and promos I read with my own voice carry the endorsement of Edward October and Octoberpod. Furthermore, I and the makers of Octoberpod repudiate any entity advertised which seeks to promote hatred, anti-American or anti-democratic sentiments, or the spread of misinformation. Now, with that in mind, Octoberpod will return after this brief ad break. It's intermission time, folks. I'm your host, Mr. Edward October. Today we're talking about the legend that is Orson Welles. Even if you're not familiar with his films, I bet you've heard about the time he drove tens of thousands of frightened radio listeners into a panic, believing that the Earth was being invaded by Martians.
Wait a minute, something's happening. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Oh, Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now.
On the night before Halloween in 1938, at the tender age of 23, Welles broadcast his adaptation of H.G. Wells's Victorian sci-fi classic The War of the Worlds for the radio program Mercury Theater on the Air. Instead of a straightforward narrative, he presented the tale as a newscast, or more precisely, as a series of breaking news segments interrupting a program of dance music.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed a message that came in from Grover's Mill by telephone. Just one moment, please. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of the village of Grover's Mill. Their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you hear will be that of Brigadier General Montgomery Smith, commander of the state...
This was a very effective technique, especially for listeners who were accustomed to being glued to their radios for news about the war brewing in Europe. It was so effective that many listeners were convinced that a Martian invasion was underway. The next morning, Halloween, the newspapers were ablaze with stories of the thousands of people who tuned in, taking to the streets in a panic and calling on law enforcement to do something about the aliens who were landing in their farms and marching on their homes to do God knows what with their death rays. But is that really how it went down? Let's take a look. And from here, I'm going to rely heavily on a Snopes article about the event. First of all, let's take a look at the sensationalized newspaper coverage. It was, well, sensationalized. Much of the reporting was based solely upon anecdotal evidence and hearsay from unnamed and otherwise sketchy sources. And of the accounts of panic which might have been true, those people were more likely concerned that they'd heard news of a German invasion than a Martian invasion. A much more plausible scenario, to be sure. Now take the format of the broadcast. It's true that the episode does contain lots of realistic-sounding news broadcasts, but it also contains stuff like this.
The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
You are listening to a CBS presentation of Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in an original dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. The performance will continue after a brief intermission. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, starring Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air.
You see, the show announces that this is all for pretend, that it's based upon a famous novel, and that it stars a famous actor whose voice can easily be recognized. Wells was very popular at the time for being a wunderkind of stage and radio. The show even begins with its customary introduction. And so, anyone frightened by news of a Martian attack must have started listening somewhere in the middle of the program. But then there's stuff like this.
Where are we to live when the Martians own the Earth?
I got it all figured out. To live underground. I've been thinking about the sewers. Under New York, there are miles and miles of them. The main ones, they're big enough for anybody. You begin to see, huh? We got a bunch of strong men together. No weakness. That rubbish, out.
As you meant me to go.
We got to make safe places for us to stay in, see? Get all the books we can. Science books. That's where men like you come in, see? We raid the museums. We'll even spy on the Martians. May not be so much we have to learn before... Just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their own fighting machines suddenly start off. Heat rays right and left. Not a Martian in them. Not a Martian in them, see? But men. Men who've learned the way how. May even be in our time. Imagine having one of them lovely things with a heat ray wide and free. We'd turn it on Martians. We'd turn it on men. We'd bring everybody down on their knees.
That's your plan.
It is frequently remarked that panicked listeners must have tuned in at the end of the show. But if they had, they would have been tuning in to something that sounded very remarkably like the type of radio drama Mercury Theater normally presented. To be frightened at the prospect of a real Martian attack, you'd have to miss the intro, identifying the show, as well as a preamble taken straight from the novel, read by Wells himself, listen to the latter half of the first act, but not continue listening through the act break, or the conventionally structured last half, or the outro, during which Wells reveals the whole thing to be a Halloween prank. Is this how thousands of listeners experienced the broadcast? Not likely. Here's what we know. First of all, it's difficult to know how many people were listening. Not a lot of this sort of data was being collected at the time, but it's estimated that only about 2% of the American radio audience was listening to Mercury Theater. It was more likely that they were listening to one of ventriloquist Edgar Bergen's wildly popular programs. Yes, you heard that right. A ventriloquist, someone whose success as a performer depends upon convincing you that you were seeing a wooden dummy do all the talking, was one of the hottest stars of old-time radio. These numbers seem to jive with the findings of an internal survey done by CBS. Now, I've read somewhere else, and I apologize I can't find the source, that Welles knew people were listening to Edgar Bergen, and so he structured the script in such a way that the juiciest Martian attack stuff would be timed to happen right when Bergen's audience might be scanning the dial for something else to listen to during the musical interlude on the Edgar Bergen show. Take it with a grain of salt, but I think this theory has a ring of truth to it. The War of the Worlds, it seems, may not have sparked mass hysteria, but it did provoke people in radio and later television to take a closer look at the habits of their audience. It's safe to say that any of us who have a podcast or YouTube channel can thank Orson Welles every time we check our analytics. And in this age of misinformation being spread and public outrage being stoked by social media, or even worse, AI, the lessons of media literacy to be learned from studying the Welles broadcast are as timely now as they were in the 1930s.
That grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch, and if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.
Welles, also an amateur magician, not a very good one though, was always interested in trickery. Trickery, especially trickery of the art forgery persuasion, is the subject of his film F for Fake. It's not quite a documentary and not quite a narrative film. You could perhaps call it a YouTube video essay made well before YouTube.
Who is Elmire? That question has yet to be answered with any real precision.
Among all fakers, Elmire is number 2.
The important distinction to make when you're talking about the genuine quality of a painting is not so much whether it's a real painting or a fake. It's whether it's a good fake or a bad fake.
No, this is a promise. During the next hour, everything you'll hear from us is really true and based on solid fact.
Welles employs a lot of subtle deceptions as Easter eggs in his film on fakes and forgeries. For example, he mentions the fake Martian invasion he conjured up, but instead of inserting audio from the actual broadcast into his film, he uses a campy recreation of the original broadcast and then passes the recreation off as the real thing. F for Fake just might be my favorite of all the films Welles directed, and it's available on Blu-ray through Criterion. Welles made this film during the latter half of his career, when he was living a more or less nomadic lifestyle in Europe, trying his damnedest to raise money for film projects that he was unable to get American financing for. Another method Welles used to raise funds was through voiceover work and appearing in commercials. His deep, godlike voice is the stuff dreams are made of, especially if you're an ad executive. Welles was a much sought-after pitchman, even if he wasn't always the easiest cat to work with.
Every July, peas grow there. We aren't even in the fields, you see. We're talking about them growing, and she's picked them. What? I don't understand you then. What must be over for July?
When we get out of that smelly field.
When I was out, we were onto a can of peas, a big dish of peas, when I said in July.
You emphasize it in July.
Why? That doesn't make any sense. Sorry. There's no known way of saying an English sentence in which you begin a sentence with in and emphasize it. Get me a jury and show me how you can say in July, and I'll go down on you. That's just idiotic, if you'll forgive me by saying that. That's just stupid. In July. I'd love to know how you emphasize in July. Impossible. Meaningless.
I think all they were thinking about was that they didn't want to.
He isn't thinking.
Listen, tell me just one last thing.
Yeah?
And it was my fault. I said in July. If you can leave every July.
You didn't say it. He said it. Your friend. Too much directing around here. We know a little place in the American far west where Charlie Briggs chops up the finest prairie-fed beef and tastes. This is a lot of shit, you know that. You want one more? More on what beef?
You missed the first beef, actually, completely.
Let me miss it.
You're emphasizing prairie-fed.
But you can't emphasize beef. That's like he's wanting you to emphasize in before July. Come on, fellas, you're losing your head. I wouldn't direct any living actor like this in Shakespeare. When you do this, it's impossible.
Orson, you did 6 last year, and by far and away the best, and I know the reason.
The right reading for this is the one I'm giving you.
At the moment.
I spent 20 times more for you people than any other commercial I've ever made. There were such pests. Now, what is it you want?
No, I think...
In your depths of your ignorance, what is it you want? Whatever it is you want, I can't deliver because I just don't see it.
That's absolutely fine. It really was.
No money is worth it.
Throughout the years, Orson Welles lent his face and voice to ads for Nashua Copiers, Perrier, Vivitar, Swanson Frozen Peas, Findus Frozen Fish, Cadillac, Jim Beam, Honeycomb Cereal, Marshmallow Peeps, and even Japanese whiskey.
Perfection. G&G. Nika whiskey.
But by far his most prolific ad campaign was for Paul Masson wines. Welles's commercials for these wines were wildly successful and ubiquitous, thanks in part to the catchphrase,
"We will sell no wine before it's time. We 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 will sell no wine before it's time. Paul Masson will sell no wine before it's time."
And if you're a citizen of the internet, you've likely come across this series of outtakes for a Paul Masson French champagne commercial.
Action, Orson, please.
Just do anything?
No, sorry, cut. Yeah, rolling. 102, take 2.
Ah, the French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence. It's fermented in the bottle, and like the best French champagne, it's vintage dated. So Paul Masson.
102, take 3. Action, please.
Ah, the French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence. It's fermented in the bottle, and like the best French champagne, it's vintage dated. So
The legend about this clip writes itself. The bibulous and rotund Welles has obviously sampled so much wine in the course of shooting the commercial that he got too shit-faced to perform. And so people printed the legend as truth. But as always, the truth is a bit more complicated than that. Mel magazine interviewed the commercial's assistant director, Peter Shillingford, and according to him, this is what actually happened. Welles called us to say he would be late. We were supposed to begin at 10 at a mansion in Los Angeles, and the crew and the extras and the agency people were all waiting for him. Finally, at noon, the limo arrived at the mansion, and Orson beckoned me into the back of the limo. "I'm in trouble, Shillingford," Orson began. He was puffing on a cigar and looking very untidy. His hat was on the floor, his tie was loose, and his shirt was buttoned up wrong. He was piss-drunk, he was sleepy, and he was mumbling. "Last night I was filming in Las Vegas. We had camera problems, so the shoot went late. To dawn. I've not slept at all," he told me. The agency men tried approaching, but I waved them away. Orson explained that he'd taken a sleeping pill when he left Las Vegas to sleep in the limo, but it had only just been kicking in, and his speech was beginning to slur. He finally asked me, "What do you suggest?" I told him that the camera and the extras were already in place, so let's give it a try. I knew he couldn't do it, but I told him that I had to put him on camera for insurance reasons, so that we could show that we couldn't do the job. That way we'd have insurance coverage for the day because of the actor malfunctioning. He understood, so I helped him out of the vehicle. He held onto my arm and we walked in. The makeup girl ran up, but he shooed her away. Then we plonked him on his piano stool and began. We did 3 takes, and what you see on camera makes it clear how they went. After I came in with the clapper on the first take and the director yelled, "Action, please," Orson had no idea he was supposed to begin. The director said, "Action," again, and Orson mumbled, "He doesn't do anything?" indicating the actor at the table with him. On the second take, Orson began with an "Ah!" and then went on about the French champagne, as the actors with him tried not to crack up as his words slurred. Finally, on the third take, Orson let out a sort of chuckle at the beginning. He went on to say most of the dialogue right, but he was so obviously pissed that we couldn't use it. I then turned to the director and one of the men from the agency, and we all agreed there was no production here. So I sent everyone to lunch and asked the owner of the mansion if we could bed down Orson for a couple of hours. She was thrilled and told me that the maid's room was just over there, so I put Orson in the maid's room and helped him out of his jacket and his trousers, and he took his shirt off. He was standing there with just his little grubby underpants on, and he climbed into the daybed. Then I went and handed his clothes to the wardrobe girl. The agency men were furious. They were talking about suing him, talking about firing him. They hated him anyway, so they'd be happy to be rid of him. But I thought, if we maybe gave him a couple of hours, we could salvage the day. A couple of hours later, I knocked on the door to the maid's room, and Orson shouted, "Where are my clothes, Shillingford? Have I been robbed?" He was just having a bit of fun, though. He was a professional, and he was good to go now. I sent the wardrobe girl in with the pressed clothes and a cup of coffee, and she came out of the room stunned after seeing this huge man in his graying underpants. By 3 p.m., he'd been seated, and he delivered the lines perfectly. We were done by 5, getting everything we needed without overtime. So, yes, Welles had been drinking, but it wasn't the cheap Paul Masson wine they had on set, and I'd wager that most of his delicate condition can be attributed to exhaustion and the effects of that sleeping pill he took. Even though he was out of sorts and slumming it, was more of a professional than the legend of the fat on-camera drunk would suggest. If you'd like to read the entire interview with Peter Shillingford, you can find it online at melmagazine.com/en-us/story/Orson-Welles-drunk-wine-commercial. If you'd like to learn more about Welles' later life and career and his love of trickery, you couldn't do better than to watch F for Fake and the Netflix documentary They'll Love Me When I'm Dead, which deals primarily with the making and posthumous completion of Welles' metatextual and semi-autobiographical last film, The Other Side of the Wind, which is also available on Netflix. And now I think you've indulged me enough. I'm sure you're quite ready for some more spooky shit. And Tara and Jessica of the podcast 3 Spooked Girls have just the thing for you. I'll return in 2 weeks. Until then, stay spooky, mes amis. Ladies, take it away.
Hey Spooksters, and welcome back to another episode here on 3 Spooked Girls. My name is Tara, and as always, I'm here with my girlfriend, Jessica.
Hello.
Hello. Oh my god, so excited. We are doing spooky stuff. I am so excited. I'm so excited. These are all having to do with real summer camps. So these are real stories.
Ooh.
I know. And I was like, you know what? I always think of the slashers at the summer camp. So I was like, this fits perfect. The first story reads, I thought he was security. This was early 90s at a school camp. I got up during the night to go out to the camp toilet. It wasn't far away. I could see it from our tent. There wasn't anybody around. On my way back, I spotted a man I didn't recognize shining a torch inside of the boys' tent to make shadows appear. It's like a flashlight. When he saw me approach, he put his torch away and walked away, but was sort of hovering around the campsite. I thought he was campsite security and that I was going to get into trouble for leaving my tent during the night, so as I was an anxious kid, it kept me up all night. As I couldn't sleep, I noticed for a good hour or so that the guy was still walking around and shining his torch into the side of tents. I could hear him and I could see the light. In the morning, I was falling asleep at breakfast and my friends were talking the piss about it. One of the teachers noticed and thought I was getting sick, so she came over to ask if I was all right. I said I had been up all night because of the camp security guard shining his torch into tents. She looked horrified and said, "What camp security?"
Dun dun dun.
Right? And went off to tell one of the male teachers. Turns out that the campsite didn't have any security and the cops were called. It ended up being some guy who was known in the area for being a sex offender, and he had recently been released from prison, and he was living near the woods in a tent.
That's not good.
No.
It's not good at all.
That sounds like a refund to everybody.
We're really sorry, but we didn't realize there was a pedophile in the woods. Our bad.
Right. Our next one is the real reason they took us into the woods. I was about 12, and when I was at sleepaway camp, the counselors took us on a hike into the woods for a night. When it came time to go to bed, of course, none of us were actually falling asleep, and we overheard the counselors talking about the police looking for someone. We learned later one of the kids was in the middle of a serious custody battle, and that the dad was planning on taking the kid, and that the reason we were in the woods was so that he wouldn't find us at the cabin. No idea if it was actually dangerous, but looking back, it's definitely unsettling.
That is crazy.
That could have put all of them in a really dangerous situation, depending, you know what I mean?
Very much so. This sounds weird. You might be too young for this, but on the Disney Channel, in the late 90s, there was this show called Bug Juice.
Yes.
Did you watch it? This is giving me I'm like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to be on it.
When you said sleepaway camp, I was because I went to church camp, which was 5 days, I guess, sleepaway camp. But I always wanted to go for you're gone for 11 weeks.
Yeah, Parent Trap. I always wanted to be peace out, homies.
Right? And I wanted to find love on that show. Just all the, there was this one girl on there and she had 14 boyfriends over the summer.
Yes. I wonder how all those people are doing now.
That is what we need. Stop showing me the little rascals. I've already seen them. Someone track down all of the Bug Juice people.
Please. And report back to us. Thank you.
Get on it. Please and thank you. That's your mission.
Please, please. Okay. Spiders and sadistic counselors. When on a camping trip, I was one of the first ones out of the bus and had to use the public bathroom. I noticed a few daddy longlegs on the outside wall of the bathroom and think nothing of it. I open the door and immediately am greeted by thousands, if not millions, of daddy longlegs that were covering the bathroom from top to bottom. The bathroom was as big as a well, 3 stalls and 3 urinals. That, and coupled with the fact that our camp counselors were sadistic and told us preteens a bunch of scary stories, then jumped out of the woods in the middle of the night screaming with bloody Jason masks. I stayed in my tent most of the time after that. Oh,
I mean, when you're a camp counselor, there's very few things that bring you joy, kind of terrorizing your campers.
That's a lot, though.
That is a lot.
Okay, this next one is called Stranger in a Gorilla Suit.
What?
I know. My youth group stayed at a campsite for a weekend trip. We were all in the cabin playing card games when someone with a gorilla suit ran by the cabin and started banging on the door. It really freaked everyone out because it was no one in our group. They came back a couple times until one of the adults confronted the person and they ran away. They never found out who the person was. Wow, I'm proud of them for keeping that a secret. I feel like a lot of teens would have been like, bitch, guess what I just did? It's so funny.
It's probably a local. It's probably a local who really hates the kids who come to camp and is I'm going to fuck with them for fun. If I lived near a camp, I'd be there's a new batch of campers. Let's get our gorilla suit out. Come on, think about it. It'd be a little fun.
Oh my God. That is funny. And get some of the counselors and oh my God, it could be a whole thing. Okay, our next one. Rumors of an Axeman. When I was young, 11 or 12, and I was at Girl Scout camp. One night after lights out, we were told by our counselors to stay in the cabins, latch the doors, oh, this is serious, and get under the beds and turn off all the lights. Some old guy guy had gotten drunk and trespassed. He had been walking around the property, but luckily didn't find any of the campgrounds. Rumors were he had an axe, but I don't know if that's true. A drunk man with an axe? Yeah, no thanks.
Just, oh my God. Like, camp seems so weird.
These are all different ones. These aren't all the same one.
No, I know that. But it's just like,
okay.
It's like such a weird thing where it's like, you know, this kind of shit happens at every single camp. Like every single campground, every single like kind of place has these like
something happens
stories. I have a ton of camp stories.
Oh my God, that might have to be a Patreon episode. Love it.
It'll be fun.
All right, so our next one is called archery. This person wrote, went to a Boy Scout camp in the mid-late 90s. They had an archery range and we were all learning how to shoot. They were big on safety, but it was the 90s. So anyways, everyone shoots and we are downrange getting our arrows when we hear someone yell out in the covered shooting area. I look up and see this kid holding an arrow at full draw and let's go. Hits the kid standing 5 feet from me in the arm. It's chaos. Everyone's running around and screaming. The kid with the arrow sticking out of him is just staring there in shock. Next year, there was no more archery training.
This is giving very Pete from Ghosts vibe, where he got shot in the neck and died and had to stay on the property.
That would suck so bad.
But also, can you imagine being that kid going back to school, like the first day of school, be like, how was your summer, Billy? He's like, well, some kid shot me in the arm with an arrow.
Oh my God, right?
Just the amount of people who would be like, I don't believe you.
Right? Oh my gosh. Okay, our next one is deep wilderness. So we're going to go to Canada for this one. We were on this really long canoe trip in northern Ontario, like deep wilderness. We were on this gorgeous clear lake when we found a secluded beach. It was really beautiful, so we decided to stay there for the night. The whole day and even sitting around the fire that night felt weird, but I couldn't really place my finger on it. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of soft country music. None of us had a stereo, so I stuck my head out of the tent to see what the fuck was up. There was a bald guy going through our campsite, picking up stuff as he went along. We made eye contact, and he put his fingers to his lips and made a shush sound, so I hid in my sleeping bag. I can't remember what he took, but it wasn't much. It turns out that there is a pretty significant, it says hermit, but I'm assuming that means like maybe homeless, population in northern Ontario.
Hermit would be like, I live in my own cabin in the woods, and I don't talk to people.
Oh, interesting.
That's how I always understood like the lore of like woodsy people. There was always like hermits. So like, and it always turned out to be the kind-hearted gentleman who just didn't like being around big noises.
Could be.
That's how like every 90s movie with a guy who lived in a cabin that was misunderstood. He always lost his wife named Sarah, who had died.
Right. Oh my God. Yes. Always, Sarah.
Who had died several years before, and he just couldn't stay in their house any longer. And he loved the woods. And so he was coming out here because it's where he felt closest to her.
And then sometimes it's even worse where they're like, she died in childbirth and then the baby died too or some shit.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. So tragic.
Awful.
The Western. Now I'm just getting Western vibes.
All right. So the next one is called Ghostly Suicide. I was in a summer camp on an island when I was 13, and we were hanging out at the beach during dawn. All of a sudden, a woman came out of nowhere, walked with big steps towards the water. She had been wearing a white cape, which she threw dramatically away. Underneath it, she was completely naked. When she reached the water, she walked into it, despite it not being very warm, until she started to swim, always straight ahead, away from the island, until we lost track of her. We stayed for more than 1.5 hours, but she never came back, and it was dark, and she was naked, and her cape was still on the beach. Back then, we joked that she was a mermaid, but later it occurred to me that we may have witnessed a suicide.
Oh, shit.
That's scary.
I'm so glad for a really, like, at least for a period of time that they were, like, their brains protected themselves.
Yeah. I like the mermaid theory, too.
Yeah. It's a mermaid. It's totally a mermaid.
Okay, this next one's called the Phantom Pooper.
I'm so excited. Go ahead.
Church camp, early 2000s. Someone was pooping in suitcases. Everyone was worried they would be targeted, but no one knew who it was. A counselor and other members were hit. They even got away with pooping in a large gathering area with many people around. I don't think they ever got caught.
Why does this sound like something that happened at one of my church camps?
Literally. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. So this is just called church camp. Church camp made us burn our panties that were shameful to God, yet kids were doing all kinds of sexual stuff in the woods. Checks out.
Yeah, no, church camp is the place where you go to learn things.
Yeah.
And it's not about God, I'll tell you that.
No. Creepers is this one. When I was 14, turning 15, I went to a confirmation camp. This place was located in the middle of literally nothing, just endless forest around us. There were a total of maybe 30 of us, teenagers as me and the camp leaders. The cottage was 2 floors high, and the second floor was the girls' bedrooms. We were settled down to sleep, and it was probably around midnight when suddenly there was a really loud banging on the only window the room had. Since it was already dark outside at this time, you really couldn't see what it was, or rather who it was, until the person turned the flashlight on. The light was going through the room, and we were able to see 2 grown men, probably around 30 years old, lurking on us and smiling. Ugh. Thanks to the one who built this place, the window could not be opened and wouldn't fit a person through it. The leaders, of course, heard the screams and voices and called the police, but the men had enough time to escape before authorities made it there. In the morning, while discussing the event of the past night, it turned out that one of the girls in the camp was actually having some kind of relationship with one of these men. Yes, illegal much.
Oh no.
And had invited them. Police did go and have a chat with these men, but they never got anything of it because they said they didn't do anything illegal enough. Basically, they were like, they didn't do any crime by being there. It's still very creepy to wake up to grown random men looking at young girls while they're sleeping on the second floor. There was a fire escape under the window. I'm sorry, isn't there like, isn't voyeurism? Can't you do something about that? Or like being a fucking peeping Tom creep? Probably not, huh?
It depends on where they are and like how severe it is. And like, if it's a real rural area, they might not like, they might just like give them a ticket. Like, it might not be something crazy.
Unfortunately, yeah. All right, our next one is called Bears. As a 13-year-old kid, I went out into the woods at like 1 a.m. with a headlamp to pee, just immediately behind my cabin because I didn't want to walk all the way to the wash house. While I'm peeing, I look forward and see a large bear just staring at me. Would have pissed myself if it wasn't for the fact I was already peeing. Either way, I finished my business while he stared at me and walked backwards back to the cabin. He turned around and walked away, but there was no chance in hell I would turn my back on a bear and run the other way. Yeah, smart kid, smart kid. That'd be like the worst thing to do.
Also, the bear was mad because you stopped him from peeing.
True.
He was like, I came out to go to the bathroom and you're in my space. The amount of times of being at summer camp and they're like, guys, you can't go out at night because there's a bear. And I'm like, then why the fuck are there kids here? A kid is going to get eaten by a bear.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this next one is called Ghosts. During the summers, I would spend a month or so visiting family in Michigan. Some of my cousins my age would go to camp in the up called Hiawatha. The cabins we got assigned for the week had about 6 campers and 2 counselors, and we were spaced far apart from each other deep in the woods, away from the common area. There were stories about a father and a son who were hunting near the campgrounds during the off-season. So the story went that the father thought he saw a big buck and took a shot at it, only to get to the deer and find out that he had shot his son in the neck. Being so deep in the woods and such a fatal shot, he shot his son in the head to stop the pain. The game and wildlife agents that had found them said the father suffered an apparent gunshot wound through the roof of his mouth of his head in what looked like a murder-suicide. The counselors always felt it necessary to tell the story to younger or new campers. Now, I don't know if hearing the story and the atmosphere of the cabins being so far from the common areas and in the deep woods caused me to see things, but a friend I was walking from the cabin to the mess hall with earlier one morning before the breakfast bell, we saw what looked like a father and a son dressed like they were hunting, carrying shotguns, and walking towards our cabin. Ours was almost second from being the farthest from anything. We took off so fast sprinting through the trees. Once we hit the open field between the cabins and the mess hall, we saw another group of guys running out behind us. We were shocked to see anyone else before the bell rang, and running no less. We asked what they were running to. They looked back from the direction they came and turned back to us and said, "We saw a hunter pointing a shotgun at us."
Oh, dang.
Damn. This next one's called Caves in the Lake. Every year I went to the same camp, and every year they tell us 3 things. Watch out for banana spiders, don't have sex, and don't attempt to dive down the lake. The lake in question has many caves at the bottom of it and is probably about 50 to 100 feet down. They used to teach scuba diving lessons, but haven't since a counselor drowned. Nobody has scuba dived in the lake or attempted to reach the bottom for 15 years. The stories are passed on from counselor to counselor, and all is relatively the same. A group of kids didn't see their counselor, searched for him, came back up when oxygen got low, and alerted another counselor. Counselors went in to the water to look for him, and people checked every inch of this camp in the middle of the woods. People were praying that he wasn't out in the water and somehow got out. 3 hours later, his body was found and taken from the water. He was 22 years old and gone just like that. Damn. Underwater cave things freak me out, so I'm good.
I don't like caves in general.
We got 2 more short ones, and that will be the end of this installment. Okay, this one is called Attempted Murder. I went to a Girl Scouts camp when I was around 8 years old, so this was around 2001. All of the counselors were young 20-year-olds. There was a girl in my group who did something to piss off the counselors. I don't remember what it was, but I know it was minor. In the middle of summer and super hot, and she was moderately overweight, they made her sit in the sun and wouldn't allow her any water as punishment. They were terrible people and made me afraid of them as a kid. That's illegal, because she could have died, like, depending on how hot it was.
Right?
Oh my God, awful. This last one just, like, it's so short, but the title just made me laugh. It's called Peacock Screams. So this person said, I went to a camp that was half a mile from a peacock farm, and I gotta say, peacocks screaming echoing through the middle of the night are fucking terrifying when you're 10 and nobody told you there was a peacock farm nearby.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that.
As an adult, that would be terrifying.
At least the camp I went to, like, it was next to a cattle ranch, which, by the way, the cattle ranch was, like, next to my dad's. It was my dad's friend's cattle ranch. But the cows would, like, because cows do, like, scream. Like, they scream in the middle of the night. And, like, city kids would be like, the fuck is that? And you'd be like, it's a cow. Calm down and eat your fun dip.
That is going to go ahead and wrap us up for this dark summer camp experiences. Bye, guys.
Toodles.
Stick around after the credits for a brief word from some of our fellow indie podcasters, creators, and friends. There may even be some bloopers, outtakes, and bonus content as well.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, everywhere with the handle at 3 Spooked Girls. Our amazing Facebook group is 3 Spooked Girls Official.
You can find us at all the usual places. Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, X, wherever you want to find us, you can find us. We're there. Just type us into Google.
YouTube,
everywhere. We are everywhere.
Like a rash.
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks for listening, guys. Stay safe.
You have been listening to Octoberpod. Octoberpod is produced, edited, and directed by Edward October. The series co-producers are M.J. McAdams and Amber Jordan. Logo and banner graphics by Jessica Good. Edward October character design by Nick Calavera. Select still photography courtesy of Unsplash.com. Select music cues by Dr. Dreamchip and various other stock music and sound effects courtesy of freesound.org. Music from Bigfoot Apocalypse and Thorax, theme from Octoberpod, composed by Nico Vitezi. All other images, music, and FX cues, except where noted, are sourced from within the public domain. Follow us on YouTube at Octoberpod Home Video, on Instagram, and the app I still call Twitter at Octoberpod VHS, and on TikTok and Blue Sky at Octoberpod. Or find us and all of our links on the World Wide Web at octoberpodvhs.com. For business inquiries or story submissions, email octoberpod@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this program, we'd be very pleased if you told your friends about us. And while you're at it, write us a 5-star or equivalent review wherever you're listening. The man who spoke to you was Mr. Edward October.
Yo, it's your boy Shitey from award-losing podcast Dungeons and Dickheads. Do you like unhinged, wholesome shenanigans performed by 4 people you've never heard of who have no idea how to D or D? Then we're the podcast for you. Search for Dungeons and Dickheads in your local podcast provider of choice. We're the purple one. Someone stole our name. Or, even better, go to dungeonsanddickheads.co.uk. That's dungeonsanddickheads.co.uk for all the episodes and some extras. Dungeons and Dickheads is the comedy podcast for people who don't D&D good and want to hear people D&D worse than them with so little budget they can't make a proper advert, but we're having fun anyway.
I'm Dean, I'm the dad.
I'm Laura, I'm the mom. And I'm Kristlyn, I'm the daughter.
And together we are Family Plot.
The Family Plot Podcast, a show where we discuss history, folklore,
true crime, and the paranormal.
minus all the oogie bits. We are PG-13.
I'm almost 15 now.
Don't ruin the commercial.
Do catch us looking into special topics like
the origins of fairy tales,
Sherlock Holmes,
and the trial of Dr. Hyde and Mr. Swope.
Find out who Dad Man Crush is.
or what happens in Krista's corner.
But behave, you two.
So come be a part of the fam.
Available on Google, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Family Plot Podcast. Bye!
Just wait until Father gets home. Those words chilled us all as a child. Now they can thrill us as adults. My name is Dan B. Fierce, author of the book Father Figure, Suspenseful Tales of Fatherhood. The calloused hands of fear will wrap around the mind in this roller coaster collection of extreme, gory, and psychological short stories and flash fiction. Get your copy of Father Figure today at danbfiercebooks.com.
That might be a good name for the episode, Reputation for the Uncanny.
Right, I've just got a handicapped cat walking all over my desk. What do you want, Discord?
What do you want? I'd like a dog.
I want to be on part of the podcast. Can you meow for us?
This is my feral wild cat.
Meow, meow, meow.
He looks so feral and wild.
Do you think he was feral? Because he's pretty chilled now, isn't he?
Yeah, but it took a lot of doing. And I am the cat whisperer.
You are the cat whisperer.
But he's best buddies with Albert now, so I've got two of them. Just got two little knobheads. Go on, off you go.
Oh, I'm so happy that little Albert's got a little friend. That's just as special
Well, yeah,
as he
'cause it
is.
was really sad because he used to have Pandora and Tinkerbell, and they both died because they were a lot older cats and they both had health issues. And then Albert was all by himself.
No.
But now he's got little Dissy, little limpy Dissy.
Oh.
Discord is a feral cat I scraped off the road after he got hit by a car, if anybody didn't know the story. I don't know if I've ever spoken about it on the podcast. And he had a completely shattered front leg and broken hips and 2 broken back legs.
He was in a bad way, wasn't he?
He was in a bad way. And he was completely feral and just attacking and hissing and just like the most fierce cat I've ever known. And now he's a teddy bear with a limp.
Same.
And he wants to get into podcasting.
Yeah.
Do you know what? If there's an opening for anyone, there's an opening for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clip, there are vampires, there are werewolves. Let's make sure I'm recording this, fucker. Yep.
What, suckling?
Suckling. Every day I'm suckling.
If you had to suckle off any animal, what animal?
Oh my
I don't like the word suckle. Probably a cow.
It's life or death. You have to do it.
Cow.
What would it be? A cow. That's quite a big titty in your mouth.
Well, it's milk, innit? Yeah, I know that all of it will be milk, but I've heard that like rabbit's milk is thick, like a pate.
Thick like pate. You heard it here first. Rabbit's milk is thick like pate.
Is that true?
Yeah, I swear it is. Because when my rabbit had babies,
Cara Beth, now's your time to shine. Is it true?
Oh, the t-shirt idea. The t-shirt idea. So rabbit milk is thick as pate.
Oh no, I'd buy some shorts and put my butt is as thick as rabbit's milk. Something like that. Something to that. Even though that's a complete lie, I have no arse.
So, okay, Becky's suckling on a cow. What are you suckling on, Tash?
I don't know. It was my question and I don't know.
I thought we had one in the ignition ready to go.
What do I... Oh, I don't know.
What
I guess it would...
suckle?
I think it would have to be a cow, you're right. Maybe one of those like nice.
We could do it. There's 4 of them as well. We could all do it at the same time.
I ain't suckling no cow. I am not putting an udder in my mouth.
Just but it could be one of those nice ones that like cuddling, you know.
Like them
makes
cute
it
cows.
weirder.
Well, the udder.
That's cuddling us while we're suckling on its udder teat.
Oh, let's move on. I'm sorry for asking that question.
I don't know what I'd suckle on, but it sure as fuck wouldn't be a cow. Gross.
Well, I wouldn't do it willingly. She made me reply, and I gave an answer.
Maybe a capybara.
It was going to be a cat.
It'd be like tiny little teat.
Would it?
What about a dolphin, Emma, since you love them so much?
I don't love dolphins. I've got nothing personally against dolphins, but I'm not like a massive fan. I don't have.
I bet you were at one point, though.
I bet you had that dolphin little
money
box.
Have you?
Everyone had one of those.
Have you met me? Do you think I was that child to have a dolphin ornament or a little jewellery box?
Well, I got bought it by someone. I didn't buy it myself.
My daughter bought one at the car boot last year and I love it.
I did not have any dolphin stuff.
Delphine? Delphine?
Delphine the dolphin? No.
Yeah. Anyway.
I was just going to say the whole group of words that go into breastfeeding, like suckling, teat, udder. None of it is nice. Nothing is nice.
Nipple. Areola.
I like areola.
Is it areola?
Areola?
Areola is such a weird word.
I like that word. That doesn't gross me out.
It sounds a little bit like a pasta dish. Would you like some areola? Or a cheese?
It does.
Have some areola on that.
Nipple, on the other hand, nipple is gross.
Nipple. I like the word nipple.
Nipple.
I only like it if I say it like that. Nipple.
Nipple.
Do you know when it's cold and you go, it's a bit nippy? Do we say nippy because
your nips
we get
are on
nippy?
show? Yeah.
I think so.
That's weird. Isn't it because Jack Frost is nipping at your nose, like from the song?
Potentially.
Maybe it's both.
Maybe
Jack Frost wasn't nipping at your nose.
I don't know.
Maybe he was nipping at your nips.
Listen, we've established we all left English education at quite a crucial point. So we are not the people to debunk this.
Can somebody find the origin of this phrase, it's a bit nippy? Please. And let us know. Write in. Spine chillers.
Shall we just Google it now rather than me?
No. Audience participation.
Yeah, exactly. What's our email address again? SCSK_pod. No, it's not that. Spinechillers.
No, it's chillers.killers.pod@gmail.com.
It's nothing like you forever.
Fucking nothing like it. So yeah, email us chillers.killers@gmail.com. No, chillers.killers.pod. Oh, fuck it. Just send a message on Facebook. It'll be right.
Yeah.
Trying his damnedest to raise money for film projects that he was unable to get American Nika whiskey clip.
In my family, we think the wine you drink the most should be the best. We like Paul Masson's Burgundy. It's smooth and rich. We serve it to our friends, and now a lot of them are serving it to their friends. Why don't you join us? Next time you go shopping and you're choosing a wine, make it Paul Masson Burgundy. Paul Masson himself said it nearly a century ago. We will sell no wine before it's time. I like to cast a party the way I cast a play with very special people, and the champagne must be equally special. Paul Masson, a premium California champagne of impeccable taste. Paul Masson wines taste so good because they're made with such care. Old Paul Masson himself said it nearly a century ago. We will sell no wine before it's time. I'm here at Paul Masson's Chateau in California. Almost every night here there's a wine tasting party, and one of the favorites is Paul Masson Chablis. It's light and crisp. It's delicious. The wine you drink the most should be the best. And they take special care with it here because they know Chablis is America's most popular wine. Paul Masson Chablis. I recommend it. Paul Masson will sell no wine before it's time. Emerald Dry from Paul Masson. It's silky smooth. It's fresh and bright. It's emerald cool. It's crisp. It's sophisticated. It's emerald dry from Paul Masson. We will sell no wine before it's time.
The taste of French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence. There's a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence. It's fermented in the bottle, and like the best French champagne, it's vintage dated. Paul Masson's superb taste shouldn't be too surprising. This champagne doesn't come from France, but it was created by a man who did, Paul Masson. Paul Masson will sell no wine before it's time.
Deep below the plains of southern France, in a mysterious process begun millions of years ago, nature herself adds life to the icy waters of a single spring, Perrier. Its natural sparkle is more delicate than any made by man, and therefore more quenching, more refreshing, and the mixer par excellence, naturally sparkling from the center of the earth. Perrier. A great deal of time and care go into the production of a fine play, just as they go into the making of a fine wine. Paul Masson's Rhine Castle. The taste is smooth, flavorful, delicious. Paul Masson wines taste so good because they're made with such care. What Paul Masson said nearly a century ago is still true today. We will sell no wine before it's time.